My name is Joyce Yang, and I'm founder of Global Coin Research. So we are a research and content platform focusing on Asia, cryptocurrency, and blockchain. What that means is that we try to provide information on what's going on in Asia that relates to mining, exchanges, local ecosystems, and regulations. And we also provide workshops that are live and virtual for our audience who are English speakers to learn about specific topics that they may have questions about regarding how do you talk to an exchange, or how do you find and talk to the regulators there locally in Japan, as an example. So I'm very grateful for the Zcash Foundation for having me here today, and I wanted to quickly talk to you guys about what's going on in Asia and the landscapes and some misperceptions that folks may have about Asia. And lastly, I want to provide some quick, helpful resources that potentially could help you when you go out there, when you're making a trip to a conference, or when you're just simply trying to learn about the ecosystem. So where are we? And this question obviously does not refer to, where are we here, which is Croatia in a beautiful hotel, but where are we in this ecosystem? And as a community, we know that often when we're talking to folks around us, it's very easy to get siloed and not realize that there is billions of people out there who actually don't know anything about cryptocurrencies, right? This is a great diagram from Zcash that they took where it shows that we're very early in the stages of adoption. I think potentially Facebook could be, take us across the chasm to early adoption or early majority, but at the same time, it could also fall into the chasm and we'll have to start over again. And I think when we're thinking about preparing ourselves for the next wave, it's worth noting that there are different jurisdictions that are seeing different paces of adoption. So as an example, if you look at this study made by Consensus about search interest in different countries. On the left side, you have the Americas, United States, and Canada, where Bitcoins were dominant as the search term, whereas Ethereum, blockchain, cryptocurrencies lag. Whereas Japan and South Korea, you see that blockchain and Ethereum are actually leading search indicators. And while these are just simply metrics that are directional, they are certainly telling of the type of adoption that we're seeing in different countries. And in Japan and South Korea, we're seeing potentially already early adoption of people moving away from Bitcoin and understanding just cryptocurrencies from a high level into actually more in-depth technologies as well as smart contracts, for example. So I always tell folks, I live in New York City, but I go to Asia about once a month or every 2 months. And I tell folks that it's a good time to go and capture mind and market share in Asia. And that's because the ecosystem is still very early and adoption is still quite nascent. But while as you folks may not think that it's important or a priority for them to go capture market share there, I think it's also worthwhile noting that there are a lot of learnings that we could take from Asia. So for example, Facebook Libra has been the talk of the town for the entire conference, I'm sure. But at the same time, if you actually look at Asia, and specifically in Korea, we're already seeing KakaoTalk, the largest messaging app in Korea, similar to that of WeChat, is already launching their mainnet at the end of this month. They have their own layer 1 blockchain, and they also have a similar staking model and members similar staking model, sorry, not members, as Facebook, and that includes folks like LG, the company, Kakao, which is a large public company, Bank of the Philippines, as well as a large gaming company in Vietnam. So whereas we're still in this adoption phase in North America, where we're waiting for Libra to launch in 2020 and see where that goes, there's a lot of good learnings that we can also take from what's already happening in Asia, and I think that's definitely worthwhile to pay attention to. And other things that we cover at Global Coin Research that we share with our folks and readers are also what's going on mining and the mining pools and ecosystems there. You know, I think developers are very much needed in this ecosystem, and there are a lot of hardworking developers and very hungry to learn in Asia that we can tap. And of course, there are a lot of investors in this ecosystem, retail, institutional included, and of course the markets that drive our moods daily when Bitcoin goes up by 20% over the last few months. And folks have asked me, many projects actually in the West have asked me, how do we do it? How do we actually approach the region? And this is supposed to be a GIF, but it turned out to be a PDF. But that is MC Jin. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with MC Jin. He was a very popular Asian American rapper back in the 2000s. So what he says is that you guys should learn Chinese. And honestly, I think in this ecosystem and generally in cryptocurrency overall, being multilingual gives you a significantly greater advantage to really be able to understand what's going in the other ecosystems. And because all the ecosystems are intertwined, it's very important, it's very helpful for anyone who actually wants to stay and kind of grow with the entire the community. And what I focused on specifically is Chinese, because I think that the Chinese community in the cryptocurrency ecosystem is by far the largest by number, just because we have a lot of people in China. At the same time, it's also the most geographically diverse. So I think that's really interesting when you see folks who speak Chinese in Singapore and Hong Kong, in Korea and Japan, and everyone talks to each other, and the community is quite tight-knit, whether that's enabled by WeChat or any other kind of communication systems. And I find that to be really interesting personally. Or you can do an IEO. Just kidding. I might get kicked out of this conference now. So here are the 11 misperceptions about community building in China and communities in general in Asia. I think many projects, sometimes because of a lack of general understanding, they may find it very discouraging to approach the ecosystem and the communities. But honestly, I would say that either you go to Asia 100% or you don't bother to spend any time at it at all. That's the better strategy for folks who actually really are thinking about building kind of a global company and project with large adoption. And the first two, I think, is pretty straightforward, but at the same time often neglected. You can't just have a Chinese language Telegram community and expect that will last. You can't just translate all your documents expected to get accepted and embraced by the locals. And that's something I think people tend to do out of laziness and lack of understanding, but honestly, that doesn't help. It will only generate the type of investors and retail folks that you probably don't want to attract into the ecosystem when you're just trying to have a Telegram community and keep pumping information into this. And translating your documents is nowhere nearly as engaging as actually just going there for a meeting. And I would tell you that you might as well spend the resources on a plane ticket rather than actually translating your documents. Oh, sorry. Number three is most of the crypto community actually speaks English or are very international. If you think about how vast the market in Asia is and how potentially many projects, perhaps in the West, are interested in learning about Asia, a lot of folks from Asia are interested also learning about the West, because obviously we're a very intertwined ecosystem. And in fact, folks from Korea and Japan would want to learn about what's going on in China and Singapore, but they will also have to learn how to speak English, because that is the most common language. So it's actually very not hard to actually trying to enter the market, but actually to penetrate it deeply, that takes a lot more effort. And number four, it's almost impossible to build a real sustainable community within 1 year. I think I see folks who actually go to Asia once a quarter who think that, we could just do a meetup and then we could start just getting this community along because, we're a foreign project, we're interesting, we have great technology. That's not the case. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you actually engage with people. And that requires communication either in English or local language, preferably in the local language. That will definitely be beneficial for you. And number 5 is any of your flaws and bad rep will be known and covered very quickly and spread throughout Asia. And I say quickly in both emphasized, because if you actually understand the Chinese or Asia local ecosystem, most of the people who go to a conference in Korea will go to a conference in Japan. So it's actually very fluid because of the ease of flight between countries. But folks who are actually either staying in China would also go to Singapore or Hong Kong. So everyone talks to each other, and the network is a lot more connected than you expect. And then number 6 and number 7, I think these are just misperceptions about community building that I think may just be very simple things that you guys probably know. But I want to emphasize not everyone in Asia is about pump and dump, obviously. Even the scammers in Asia work harder than those in North America, and that's honestly, I think, is true. And you think of them as dumb money, but the retail investors are really not. And then that's I think that speaks to the societal construction of what's happening in these countries. If you look at the social immobility and the financial insecurity of several countries like China, where you cannot take your money abroad, or in Korea, we are unable to really have the ability to invest into foreign entities or foreign stocks, for example, buy into cryptocurrencies and kind of getting engaged with the community makes a lot more sense. And you can hire quickly. I think that's something I emphasize with folks too, but hiring well will be very difficult. Where you find the intersection of someone who's tech savvy and also speaks English and understands the cultural nuances and also can engage the community in a very, very strong way is quite hard, and that will take some time. And number 10, I think, don't avoid the regulators to befriend them. This is especially the case in many of these local countries like Thailand or Southeast Asia and Singapore and Hong Kong, because they're very open to speaking with all the projects. And I think this is a new challenge for regulators as well in this new crypto, global world where they have to face with a lot of foreign projects and foreign entities, and they have to learn how to onboard themselves into this new technology innovation. And at the same time, they're open to it, and I think they're more proactive than the SEC of what we see in the Americas, for example. In Thailand, the regulators talk to the projects very often through Facebook messaging, or they can show up at meetups. I think that's really great. And you can see how Thailand in the past last year actually has really been very active in cryptocurrencies and setting up regulations. That's because they're very engaged with the communities there. And I think that's a good thing, and it's something that you guys should all try to do if you were ever actually considering going to a market in Asia. And then not everyone's about that Tron style. I think I personally think Justin Sun brings a bad rep, and honestly, a lot of people in China and the cryptocurrency community in China really hates him too. So sorry, this gets a little personal now, but at the same time, I think that's just one style of projects. But definitely be aware that there are many other quality projects there that I think is worth looking at and that are working very hard in building and advancing this ecosystem as well. And I think one underrated factor that projects fail to consider when going to Asia is something that you may not think about, but it's kind of contradictory, which is that having solid execution, building a brand in North America. And this, to me, I think goes back. I see this trend because I think going back to kind of historically where we see innovations and technology coming out of Silicon Valley, and where Asia traditionally has been lagging in that respect. And they have historically also always looked towards kind of the Valley for a mature and sophisticated technology hub. So that's always something that I think is underestimated, because that's the trend that I see people are kind of gravitating back towards. And it's definitely a worthwhile thing to keep in mind. So when we're talking about go-to-market strategy, I think often I talk to projects and ask them, who are you targeting? What are you thinking about there? There are many types of actors in this space. There's traders, investors, node participants, stakers, developers, miners, speculators, exchanges, everyone, right? There's many different types of actors. And I think I encourage folks to think about their own framework. And I really appreciated when Josh posted, Josh Swihart from Electric Coin company posted this framework blog of how they think about going to market and bringing adoption to Zcash and Electric Coin. And for Electric Coin, they are focusing on currency adoption. So they actually break it down into very, approachable steps, which are speculative asset, store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. Right? If you think about speculative asset, it's not necessarily aligned with what Zcash Electric Coin is trying to do, but at the same time, it's also very important to bring awareness to the ecosystem, and it brings liquidity to the ecosystem. And once you get to that stage, then you could actually potentially think about store of value use cases for near-term full adoption, and then exploring medium exchange use cases in an effort to find product market fit. And these are all really great ideas that came from Josh and the team. And I think it's worthwhile to have a framework when you're going to market in there, because there are many different noises and different actors, and being focused is definitely one of the things that many projects probably don't do as well as they should do. So having a framework and diagram just to ensure that identifying the needs of the community, whether it's store value or medium exchange, if you actually go from top left and all the way around to identify how do you create that loyalty loop. That's something that I think is really interesting that I encourage folks to go check out. And that after that strategy phase, definitely think about identifying the right partners, right? And depending on your strategy, whether that's in China or Korea and Japan, you'll need probably a different partner for a different country. If you think about historically how companies from the US have gone to market in China, for example, they always have gone through with a joint venture. That's because it's so culturally hard to penetrate. And if you look at examples of failures, Uber, I think, comes to mind, where you could spend millions of dollars but still cannot actually beat the market, beat the local competitors there. And I encourage folks to obviously meet in person, either if you want to engage with Asia just lightly to understand what's going on, or also to actually understand the local ecosystem in depth. Do a trip around Asia to start off with Hong Kong, Singapore, where there are English speakers. And there are crypto hubs where folks travel back and forth very often from their dominant country, and kind of share opinions. And the regulators are also quite open there, more so than I think some of the other countries. And these are just simple ways to try to communicate with them, reach out, which are social media channels that I think may be useful. But I think Twitter is definitely a good venue for learning and communicating with folks. And here is actually our some snapshots of our guidebook that we're releasing to all of ZCon's attendees and those who are on live watching the workshop right now. We are providing this guidebook to go to Asia to understand the communities and who those folks are. And it's available actually in the Amazon store. If you search for Asia Crypto, you'll actually be able to download the book for free. And it's our first time launching it, so hopefully to get some feedback from folks to see if these resources are helpful. So what we're including these in the guidebook is the local blockchain communities where you could identify the news and the trends, and then the conferences that may be important that could help you plan your meetings and plan your trips, and then also actual the local neighborhoods where you could meet these people. I think these are just very easy things to do whenever you go on a trip. Go check out these neighborhoods. Those are always really important to just connect with the folks around the world, because we are global inherently. And try to do a meetup with them. And this is following up with identifying the right partner, and actually if you want to go to penetrate the market more deeply, trying to do a meetup and work with them and see what kind of people they actually attract there locally. And that will really help you understand the local ecosystems and also filter out if those partners are actually right for you. And this is a strategy that I think is easy to approach when you're first trying to learn about the ecosystem and thinking about where you want to engage, because often projects come to me and they're like, we want to engage with Asia, but we don't know where to start. And I think you have to start doing your homework in every country, see where is the fit for you. and then do that very consistently. So either I think you go 100% or you just don't go at all. These are just kind of resources that could potentially help you to understand that, how do you go about messaging folks and what kind of messaging channels that they use. But if you actually look at the guidebook, it's actually a lot more in depth, where we actually talk about the regulations, the ecosystem trends, and it's generated by a lot of the local community members who actually provided that resource for us. So I think those are really great for you to ever check out and see if it's being helpful for you. And that's the handbook itself. So it's an abbreviated version, and it's basically our V1. I hope you guys could potentially check it out and download it and see whether you like it or not. You can search for Asia Crypto on Amazon, and it's there. So thank you so much. If you have any questions. Yeah.
I assume it's the obvious question. What do they want in terms of privacy? Individual versus B2B privacy. Is there a trend concerning surveillance, individual user rights and stuff like that?
Yeah, I often get that question about Asia, and I think I almost think about privacy, for example, in China, and the citizens, I think about it as a feature, but not a must-have. But at the same time, I think with increasing regulatory environment that we're seeing now, we're kind of under the new president who is looking to implement more blockchain technologies around the ecosystem in the countries, that's coming from Korea, that's coming from Japan, and also China, where they, encourage enterprises to really build out blockchain solutions. I think privacy will become increasingly more of concern. And but currently, though, I think that if you look at primarily the transactions that are going through and what people are using, they're using Bitcoin, and they're using Bitcoin to evade capital control, and that's the primary use case. Hello.
The Zcash community is currently looking at a question of the dev fund that will fund development of this coin after October 2020, where the current funding stream expires. And there's the governance question of how to direct it. One of the proposals is to delegate the hot potato to the miners and have the miners vote block by block on whether to direct the 20%, say, of that block rewards to the electric coin company, to the foundation, to other parties, or to burn it. This puts the decision at the discretion of miners who are rumored to be mostly located in the Far East, and who I personally have never met, and I have no idea how they would think of any kind of the governance and prioritization procedures that a community is facing. So how can you learn more about how they view things and how they are likely to exercise such discretion?
Yeah, for sure, that's a great question. And I think historically, the mining community has been played a more of a kind of low-key kind of presence in this ecosystem. They are just simply creating their own farms or using their rigs to make some money. But I think this is also a challenge for them to try to understand and helping them to understand how should they participate in the ecosystem. And it's a two-way conversation for sure. I think in scaling Bitcoin happening this week in San Francisco, there are actually a lot of miners who are showing up to engage with the community, and it's the first time I actually seen that. And they're Chinese miners and many of them don't actually speak Chinese, because I don't think you need to speak Chinese to speak English, to actually just mine. But at the same time, now I think that's a new challenge that we all face as an ecosystem, where we need to have this, despite the language barrier, we should be